The galactic distress call. The gleaming spires of Harmonium Station caught the light of 3 distant suns, casting prismatic reflections across the void of space. Inside the Grand Assembly Chamber, representatives from 72 spacefaring civilizations sat in concentric rings, their voices a cacophony of panic and desperation. High Arbiter Zellian, a willowy figure with skin like polished obsidian and 6 elongated fingers on each hand, raised his ceremonial staff. The chamber fell silent. The situation cannot be overstated. Zellian's voice resonated through the neural translators embedded in each delegate's communication device. The Void Swarm has consumed 3 outer systems in the span of 17 cycles. Primora Colony is projected to fall within 5 rotations. Holograms materialized above the central dais, showing real-time footage of the carnage at Ilara, the most recent system to be overrun. Living ships, dark pulsating masses of biological matter laced with veins of glowing purple energy, swarmed a peaceful agricultural world. The colony's meager defenses had lasted less than an hour. 15 million sentients, whispered a delegate, from the Cephian Confederacy, their tendrils waving in distress. Gone. Just gone. Ambassador Thelix of the Naravan Assembly rose from his seat, his forearms gesturing with practiced diplomatic precision. His azure scale shimmered under the chamber's light. The Defense Coalition fleet is scattered across 17 sectors, Thelix stated. Even with emergency protocols, we cannot assemble enough firepower to halt the swarm before Primora falls. And after Primora, he didn't need to finish. All knew that after Primora the swarm would reach Velnar, a hub world with over 1 billion inhabitants. There is one option we haven't considered, said a voice from the outer ring. Heads turned to face Lauren Vask, representative of the Central Core worlds. She was old, her carapace bearing the cracks and discolorations of 2 centuries of life. The Deathworlders, she said simply. The chamber erupted. Some delegates chittered in alarm. Others hissed their disapproval. A few simply stood and left, the chamber in protest. Order, Zellian commanded, striking his staff against the floor. Representative Vask, you cannot be serious. The quarantine protocols exist for a reason. And what reason is that precisely? Vask clicked her mandibles together in their species equivalent of a wry smile. Because they evolved on a world that would kill most of us within minutes? Because their bodies can repair damage that would be fatal to our kind? Because they think in ways we find unsettling? Because they are dangerous, interjected the Tholian emissary, his crystalline form pulsing with agitation. Have you forgotten the historical records? Their homeworld is a nightmare of competing predators, extreme weather, and constant geological instability. They didn't just survive it, they conquered it. And then they nearly destroyed themselves multiple times with their own weapons. Ambassador Thelix had remained silent during the exchange, his inner eyelids flickering rapidly, a sign of deep calculation among his species. How long has it been since official contact with Earth? He finally asked. 23 standard years, answered High Arbiter Zellian. We maintain a monitoring station in their system, but direct interaction has been minimal by decree of this very assembly. Thelix's scales shifted to a deeper blue. And in that time, how has their technological development progressed? A data specialist stepped forward, projecting new images above the dais. Earthships. Many Earthships. Sleek, angular vessels bristling with weapon systems unlike anything in the Alliance fleets. Their military technology has advanced considerably, the specialist reported. They've constructed defense platforms throughout their system and maintain a standing fleet that could mobilize within hours. Their ships are designed primarily for combat, unlike our multi-purpose vessels. And their soldiers? Thelix pressed. Still biological, not synthetic as many assumed they would transition to. Their natural resilience makes augmentation less necessary. They can survive in environments that would require specialized equipment for any of us. The chamber had grown quiet again, all eyes on the images of Earth's fleet. They've been waiting, Vask said softly. All these years they've been preparing, knowing we might one day come back. High Arbiter Zellian's expression was unreadable. Ambassador Thelix, you seem to have formed an opinion. Thelix stepped into the center of the chamber, his scales, now pulsing between shades of blue and green. I propose we send an envoy to Earth, not to ask for a few ships or weapons, but for direct military intervention. Their fleet could reach Primora before the swarm. Their soldiers could survive environments the swarm creates. And what would we offer in return? Demanded the Tholian. They've wanted access to galactic trade and technology for decades. We offer them what they've always wanted, Thelix replied. A seat at this table. After hours of debate, the vote was narrowly cast. Ambassador Thelix would journey to Earth, carrying with him the authority to negotiate humanity's return to the galactic community, provided they helped stop the Void Swarm. 3 days later, Thelix's diplomatic vessel emerged from faster than light, travel at the edge of the Sol system. Almost immediately, his ship was surrounded by Earth defense drones. Naravan diplomatic vessel, came the transmission in perfect galactic standard. You are entering restricted space. State your business. This is Ambassador Thelix of the Galactic Alliance, he responded. I request immediate audience with Earth's governing authority on a matter of extreme urgency. A pause, then. Transmit your credentials and await escort. Within hours, Thelix found himself in a stark meeting room within the United Earth Defense, headquarters in Geneva. The walls were lined with screens showing real-time data from throughout the solar system. Around a circular table sat 12 humans, 6 in military uniform, 6 in civilian attire. Admiral Elena Reyes, commander of Earth's combined defense forces, studied Thelix with eyes that had seen too much combat. 23 years, she said finally. That's how long it's been since an official Alliance representative set foot on Earth. It must be serious. Thelix activated his holographic projector. Images of the Void Swarm filled the room. 3 systems have already fallen, he explained. The next will be Primora Colony, with 30 million inhabitants. After that, a major hub world. The Alliance defense forces cannot mobilize quickly enough. And now you need us, said a civilian, identified as Director Chen of Global Affairs. The dangerous Deathworlders you quarantined are suddenly useful. Thelix's scales rippled in acknowledgement of the bitter truth. Yes, we need what only humans can provide, a combat-ready fleet that can deploy immediately, soldiers who can survive conditions that would kill Alliance forces and... He hesitated. And what? Pressed Admiral Reyes. Your perspective, Thelix admitted. The Void Swarm adapts to conventional tactics. We believe your unique evolutionary history might produce approaches they cannot anticipate. The humans exchanged, glances, silent communications passing between them. What does Earth gain? Asked President Okafor, her voice calm but firm. Thelix took a breath. Full Alliance membership, access to galactic trade routes, technology exchange, colonization rights in unclaimed systems. Everything you asked for 23 years ago. Admiral Reyes leaned forward. And the quarantine? Lifted, permanently. The eyed room fell silent as the humans considered the offer. Thelix could see calculations running behind their eyes, not just strategic ones, but moral ones too. These were not the simple barbarians some Alliance members portrayed them as. How long do we have? Asked Admiral Reyes. The Void Swarm will reach Primora in 5 days. Director Chen frowned. And how long would it take an Alliance fleet to reach it? 11 days minimum, Thelix replied. But your ships are faster. President Okafor stood. Ambassador, we'll need to discuss this privately. Of course, Thelix rose, then paused. I should mention, this offer comes with conditions. Humanity would be expected to follow Alliance protocols once the crisis is resolved. Your military would operate under joint command and shared space. Admiral Reyes laughed, a sound that made Thelix's scales flutter in surprise. Trying to put a leash on us already? She asked, but there was no malice in her voice. Let's focus on saving Primora first, then we can argue about who salutes whom. After Thelix was escorted out, The humans debated intensely. Military officers reviewed the tactical data. Scientists analyzed what little was known about void swarm biology. Diplomats weighed the potential for political advantage. 3 hours. Later, Thelix was called back. President Okafor stood as he entered. Earth will respond to the Alliance's request for aid. First Fleet will deploy within 12 hours, consisting of 47 combat vessels and support craft. Admiral Reyes will command the operation personally. Thelix felt relief wash over him. Thank you, President Okafor. The Alliance. She raised a hand, cutting him off. This is not a blank check, Ambassador. We expect the Alliance to honor its commitments when this is over. Earth has been patient for 23 years. That patience has limits. Understood, Thelix said, recognizing the steel beneath her diplomatic words. As the meeting concluded, Admiral Reyes approached Thelix. Ambassador, I'd like you to join me on the flagship, she said. Your knowledge of the Swarm and Alliance protocols will be valuable. Thelix hesitated only briefly. I would be honored, Admiral. Throughout the next 12 hours, Thelix watched in amazement as Earth mobilized for war. Ships were provisioned, troops were briefed, and weapons were prepped with an efficiency that would have been impossible in the fragmented Alliance command structure. Standing on the bridge of the UES Dauntless, Earth's largest dreadnought, Thelix felt a mixture of hope and apprehension as the countdown to departure began. Earth was sending its children to war once again, but this time they were fighting for more than just humanity. The Deathworlders were coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. Operation Scorched Stars. Captain Maya Harrison stood at the viewport of the UES Dauntless, watching as the massive human fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. 47 warships, from nimble corvettes to the imposing dreadnought she currently served on, surrounded by a cloud of autonomous combat drones. Primora system secured, Admiral, she reported. No sign of the void swarm yet? Admiral Reyes nodded, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. Status of the colony? Evacuation is at 60% capacity. Their orbital platforms are intact but undermanned. Ambassador Thelix approached, his scales shifting in what Harrison had come to recognize as nervous anticipation. This is unprecedented, he said quietly. Your fleet managed the journey in just over 3 days. Alliance calculations suggested it would take at least 4. We made some modifications to the drives, Harrison replied with a slight smile. Earth engineers tend to find manufacturer limitations flexible. Before Thelix could respond, the tactical officer called out, multiple contacts at the system edge, energy signatures consistent with void swarm biology. Show me, ordered Reyes. The main display shifted to show a mass of writhing shapes emerging from hyperspace. Unlike conventional ships, the void swarm vessels had no uniform design. Each was unique, a grotesque amalgamation of organic matter surrounding a pulsing core of energy. Some were small and swift, others massive and slow-moving. All were heading toward Primora. How many? Reyes asked. At least 300 smaller craft and 27 capital ships, came the response. They're deploying in a formation we haven't seen before. Thelix's scales paled. More than attacked Alara. They must have sensed the evacuation. Reyes studied the display for a moment longer, then straightened. Battle stations. All ships form up in hammer and anvil configuration. Corvettes to establish perimeter defense around the evacuation vessels. As the bridge erupted into controlled activity, Harrison leaned toward Thelix. You're about to see why Deathworlders make good allies in a fight. The first engagement began 30 minutes later. The Void Swarm, seemingly unconcerned with the human fleet, continued its direct approach toward Primora. This was their first mistake. They're not adjusting course, Reyes observed. They don't consider us a threat. They've never encountered humans before, Thelix said. They don't know what you're capable of. Reyes smiled grimly. Let's educate them. Weapons free. Execute Operation Scorched Stars. The human fleet's opening salvo was devastating. Unlike the energy weapons favored by Alliance vessels, Earthships launched projectiles. Tungsten rods accelerated to near-relativistic speeds, tearing through the biological hulls of the swarm vessels. But the Void Swarm adapted quickly. The smaller craft began evasive maneuvers, while the larger ships extruded new tissue to seal breaches. Energy tendrils lashed out, catching 2 human corvettes and draining their power reserves in seconds. "Central Command, this is Firebreak Squadron," came a transmission. "The standard weapons are having diminishing returns. The bastards are learning." "Implement Phase 2, Reyes ordered. Throughout the fleet, weapon systems reconfigured. The next wave of attacks utilized a chaotic mixture of methodologies: electromagnetic pulses, focused radiation, chemical compounds specifically designed to interfere with biological processes, and old-fashioned explosive ordnance. Harrison watched Thelix's reaction as the battle unfolded. The ambassador's eyes were wide, his scales fluctuating through colors she couldn't interpret. "You're using different weapons on each ship," he said finally. "Deliberately inconsistent attack patterns." "Why?" "Because uniformity is predictable," Harrison explained. "Earth evolved thousands of different predators, each with different hunting methods. We learned to be unpredictable to survive." On the tactical display, the battle expanded into 3 dimensions. Human ships moved in formations that seemed disorganized, but were actually carefully choreographed chaos. When the swarm adapted to one attack vector, they found themselves vulnerable to 3 others. However, the Void Swarm's numbers were taking their toll. 5 human vessels were now disabled, their crews evacuating to nearby ships. The massive organic capital ships continued their inexorable push toward Primora. "Evacuation status?" Reyes demanded. 87% complete, came the response. "But we're running out of time. The swarm will be in range of the colony in 20 minutes. Reyes studied the display, then tapped a sequence into her console. "All ships, this is Admiral Reyes. Execute Sunburn Protocol." Harrison's breath caught. "Admiral, Sunburn hasn't been field tested." "No time like the present, Captain." Throughout the fleet, specially designed warheads were loaded. Not nuclear, something far more insidious. When launched, they appeared to be standard missiles, drawing minimal attention from the now battle-savvy swarm. But upon detonation, they released no explosion. Instead, they dispersed clouds of engineered microorganisms, bacteria designed specifically to target the biological components of swarm vessels. The effect wasn't immediate, but within minutes, the nearest swarm ships began to shudder. Their movements became erratic. Portions of their hulls developed necrotic patches that spread rapidly. "My God," Thelix whispered. "You weaponized bacteria?" "Earth is full of organisms that can kill us," Harrison replied. "We've had a long time to study them." The biological attack was turning the tide, but the largest swarm vessels, the ones that could still destroy Primora with a single strike, continued their advance, seemingly immune. "They've partitioned their biological systems," the science officer reported. "The bacteria can't spread to vital areas." Reyes nodded as if she'd expected this. "Deploy the boarding teams." Thelix's scales went almost white. "Boarding teams? You're sending humans onto those things." "Into, actually," Reyes corrected. "Our analysis suggests the energy cores are vulnerable, but only from inside." From specialized bays on 3 assault carriers, drop pods launched toward the largest swarm vessels. Each contained 6 soldiers in sealed combat armor, carrying weapons designed for close-quarters combat in hostile environments. Harrison activated a direct feed from one team's helmet cameras. The interior of the swarm vessel was a nightmare: landscape of pulsating tissue, caustic fluids, and defensive organisms that resembled earth insects scaled up to horrifying proportions. Yet the humans moved through this environment with grim efficiency. Where defensive measures appeared, they adapted tactics instantly. When one approach failed, they tried another without hesitation. It was evolution in action. The adaptability that had allowed humans to conquer their death world now applied to an alien threat. "They're reaching the core chambers," Harrison reported. "Telemetry shows intense energy readings." On the screen, The boarding team reached a central cavity housing a pulsing sphere of purple energy. As they placed their charges around it, the vessel's interior convulsed, crushing 2 soldiers instantly. "Team compromised," came the calm voice of the squad leader. "Core charges placed. Detonation in 30 seconds. Tell my Wi-Fi." The feed cut off as the charges detonated. Outside, the massive swarm vessel convulsed once, then went dark, its biological components dying rapidly without the energy core. Throughout the fleet, similar scenes played out. Human vessels took heavy damage, but inflicted worse. Boarding teams, despite devastating casualties, neutralized the largest swarm ships from within. And slowly, the tide turned. 2 hours later, it was over. The Primora system was secured, the evacuation complete. Of the original swarm force, none remained functional, though Alliance scientists would have plenty of debris to study. The cost had been high: 11 human ships destroyed, 14 severely damaged, and over 800 personnel lost, including most of the boarding teams. On the Dauntless's bridge, Admiral Reyes stood before a holographic display showing the aftermath of battle. Beside her, Ambassador Thelix struggled to process what he had witnessed. "Your people," he said finally. "They sacrificed themselves knowingly. The boarding teams. They knew they wouldn't return." Reyes nodded solemnly. "They volunteered. Every one of them. Why? For a colony of aliens who have kept humanity isolated. For decades? Because it was the right thing to do," Reyes replied simply. "And because Earth remembers what it means to stand alone against extinction." 3 days later, a formal ceremony was held aboard the Alliance diplomatic vessel Concord. Representatives from the Alliance Council, including High Arbiter Zellian himself, had traveled to Primora to witness the historic moment. Before assembled dignitaries from dozens of species, President Okafor, who had arrived on a fast transport, signed the accords officially welcoming humanity into the Galactic Alliance. The quarantine was lifted. Earth ships would now have access to trade routes, technology exchanges, and colonization rights. As the ceremony concluded, Thelix approached Captain Harrison, who stood with the surviving members of her bridge crew. "Captain, I have been instructed to inform you that the Alliance Defense Coalition wishes to establish a joint training program with Earth's military forces. They believe there is much to learn from your unconventional approaches." Harrison raised an eyebrow. "And how does the Alliance feel about that?" Thelix's scales rippled in what she now recognized as amusement. "Let's just say that perspectives have shifted considerably. The term Deathworlder is being reconsidered in official communications." Harrison smiled. "And unofficially?" "Unofficially, I believe many species will sleep better knowing that the Deathworlders are on their side." His expression grew serious. "The Void Swarm will return, Captain. Our analysts believe what we faced was merely a scouting force." "Then we'll be ready," Harrison replied. "And this time, we won't be fighting alone." As she gazed out at the stars, no longer distant and unreachable but now open to human exploration, Harrison thought about the cost of this new era. The names of fallen comrades would be memorialized, their sacrifice honored. But they had purchased something precious: humanity's rightful place among the stars. The Deathworlders had arrived on the galactic stage, and the universe would never be the same.